the effort.
It's the effort. So now let's have sexy time.
All right, let's do it.
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Down the Game, episode 16. Well, first of all, I want to say sorry for missing you all last week. Last week was a holiday. There was a lot going on. I hope everyone enjoyed your holidays. Isles, how did you enjoy your holidays, bud?
Pretty mellow. The weather this year kind of hampered things a little bit, and it was just mellow. It was nice. Mainly immediate family and some good food, and of course, some good wine. What about you?
Some good wine. Well, it was a pretty mellow day, too. We talked about the meals we were preparing for the families. Yeah. I did a nice beef tenderloin roast. So had that. Watched the Packers' victory. And just took naps. So, you know, I can't say there was a whole lot that happened. But let's talk about the Packers tonight.
Let's do that.
And let's talk about this victory we had against the Dolphins. So the topic I wanted to bring up was the playoffs. Note a fantasy after all. That's a typo.
Yeah, that's all right.
Not a fantasy after all. Not a fantasy Adderall.
Is that okay? Is that a fantasy?
Fantasy.
Yeah. You know, or maybe like a Freudian slip. You want to note a fantasy?
Note a fantasy, yeah. It's based on the last episode we did where it was like Fantasy Island. The Packers making the playoffs was kind of a fantasy. But we come back this week, and now it's not so much a fantasy after all. What do you think?
I think if you roll the tape back to where we talked about that, you're going to see that you wrote it off. I didn't write it off at that time. I was feeling pretty good. We brought it up on the video. We were trying to figure out what they had to do. I felt like at that time you were thinking, no. I kind of remember kind of leaving the show just a little bit like, I can't believe he's just writing it off. And I wouldn't have blamed you at that point to some degree because of the fact of how they were playing. But I felt like these other teams kind of suck. They're not that good. Like, they're okay, but the teams they're trying to battle it for are not much better than Green Bay. And so it doesn't surprise me that we're here. I mean, and it's fun at this point of the season to have any shot at all. And I think the best part, Todd, living in this state is even if we're not good, right? They still remember who Green Bay is and they hate us so much that it's got to be scaring the shit out of the Minnesota folk around here. Just knowing that we're lingering. If we win this weekend and we're doing the frickin' jaw, they're going to be freaking out that we're in the playoffs and that we could potentially ruin their like little dream season that they think they're having. So
yeah, that's a great point, Isles. And I'll tell you what, you were right. You had a little more confidence than I did. I guess I'm a more pessimistic dude than you are, but you were absolutely right. The teams that were ahead of us aren't so good, and they had tougher schedules. I guess what kind of surprises me is that the Packers are playing as good as they are right now. Granted, we played the Bears and then the Rams, and two bad football teams, and the Dolphins seem to be having a bit of a nosedive right now. It doesn't matter. You still got to win the games, and every win in the NFL can be a difficult one. So I guess my lack of confidence in the Packers was that they couldn't win out. Yeah. But now we're sitting here with only 2 games left, 2 tough games.
Yep.
But
it's possible.
If they win, they have like a 50% chance of making the playoffs if they win out.
Yeah, I mean, the scenario, if you have to win out, is about as good as it can be, too. I mean, the fact that they're at home at this point in the season, the weather's not going to be good. Hopefully that should calm down the Jefferson kid a little bit. And then the ball can just bounce around a little bit in that kind of weather, and you get a little bit of luck, and the luck plays on your side during a football game. That can be the difference in the game. I honestly think that they can win. I've watched a lot of those Viking games, and I don't give a crap what anybody says or what their record is. They are not as good as their record shows. Their defense is horrid. And if we can get something rolling on offense, there's no doubt that we can make that a ball game and win that game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Vikings are fraudulent. They're frauds, man.
Yep.
And their season sort of reminds me of LaFleur's first season, where the Packers were winning all these close games. They were getting kind of lucky. They ended up 13-3, but once they got to the playoffs, they just got hammered. Right.
Yep. Yeah,
it was kind of a smoke and mirrors 13-3, and I kind of see the Vikings being that this year. One thing I want to talk about is that I think the effect of the weather is being a bit overhyped in this game, simply because if we look at the forecast, the temperature is going to be about 36 degrees at Lambeau Field. So that's hardly freezing. And also, you have to consider that the Vikings also live in this type of climate, so at least they're definitely used to the cold, living in it, and they also can practice in it outside. So I think maybe the effect of the cold is a bit overblown, and it's not going to be the advantage that everyone thinks it's going to be. But regardless, it's still better to play the Vikings at home because I like our chances better there.
I always feel like the other teams have, in the last, 5 or 6 years, have been almost better prepared for the cold. I remember watching Favre in that last game where he threw the interception in overtime. That dude looks so cold to me. Like it was almost like, I'm just going to throw a pick because I want to get the hell out of here, you know?
Yeah. Just I want to get home, get something to eat.
Exactly right.
And to piggyback on that, Isles, I don't think Rodgers has looked incredibly great as a quarterback these last few playoff games in Lambeau Field.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see. And, I do like our chances, but, you got to play the game. So I'm being cautiously optimistic.
Yep, I like it. Hey, we're in the game. That's all I know. We're 2 weeks left, and we still got a chance to get to the playoffs, which is great.
And if you make the playoffs, who knows? You might catch lightning in a bottle. We just don't know.
Yep.
So let's move on to our next topic quick is, I wanted to ask you, Al, are the Packers improving enough at this point of the season? We knew they were a poor football team in the middle stretch of the year, and they're starting to improve. Things are starting to gel both offensively and defensively. Is the improvement enough, and has it come too late?
When you say enough, were you thinking of something in mind like enough to win the Super Bowl, or just enough in general, or what are you thinking?
Enough to make a deep run into the playoffs.
Yeah, I would say no. I mean, they're definitely playing better, especially offensively. And I think with the complementary football, you're seeing now some more turnovers on the defensive side of the ball. But you look at that Dolphins game, and is that McDaniels guy is an idiot for not just running the ball on every play. I feel like they would have won the game if they would have just ran the football all day long, because we clearly couldn't stop them. The guy got like Mozart or whatever his name is, got basically 12 yards of carry every time he carried it. And then they started throwing the ball all the time. And Tua's he's kind of a streaky QB, I think. Some of those throws were just rotten. So,
yeah, they were. I'm going to push back a little on this, Isles.
All right, good.
I'm going to say Mozart had the first few carries he had were great. I think he had 30 yards on his first 2 carries. But shortly after that, I feel like the Packers started to shut down the run a little more and getting the Dolphins into more passing situations. And then on top of it, they were having some wild success, especially in the first half with their passing game.
Yeah.
So, I'm just going to push back a little bit, and I think the Packers defense did a little better once they settled down with the run.
What did you think our make out of that, the defensive back coach supposedly ripping him a new one at half uncharacteristically? And
yeah, I mean, sometimes you need that. I've never been the type of dude who thinks a rah-rah, yell, fire and brimstone type coach is effective, especially when you're dealing with grown adults who make 10 times more than you do
Yeah, yeah.
as a coach. So I think it's apparent that when Gray did have this meltdown at halftime, calling people out, that it really did hit hard, and it was the right thing to do at the right time. And that's what a veteran coach can do. And they should have a good feel of what the team is, where the team is at, and be able to manipulate that a little bit. So what are your thoughts on it? Do you think that had a huge effect?
I don't know if it was just coincidence of the timing or what, but clearly it seemed like I can't remember if it was who it was, but one of them basically just said it was great, like it motivated them and it helped them out, and so yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think you're right. It's one of those things where if you do it every week, it's just not effective.
No,
but clearly there was some motivation that was needed, and it seemed like the right thing to do at the right time, and it certainly produced results. So I think that's great. What going into this game, how do you know anything about like injury wise? I felt like that's one of my biggest concerns going in this game, that if felt like a lot of players got injured last week. I don't know who's all going to be ready to go. But that feels like if we were going with full strength, we didn't have quite the injury bug that's plaguing us right now. Going into this game, I'd feel a lot better than if some of those players are not going to be there.
Yeah, I think the key players that we're talking about is Nixon, Watson, Yash Nishman, and whether or not Bakhtiari is back from the appendectomy this week. Heck, there isn't any new word on them, and I don't expect that they are going to tell us much until just before the game. But if Watson and Nixon are out, I think that adversely affects this team. Oddly enough, when Yash went out and Royce Newman went in, he held up okay. And I almost hate to admit that because I'm not a Royce fan, and I haven't been. Well, heck, I want him to do good. Let's just say that. But I don't have any faith in him, and he seemed to play okay.
Yeah.
And as we know, Zach Tom is getting the job done. He is not a Bakhtiari, but he's getting the job done. And one other thing I want to point out about this line is that I don't know if you saw some of the blocks that Big Sexy had, but he was knocking some dudes backwards. He was pancaking a lot of dudes and being really nasty, especially at the beginning of the game. And that type of attitude is what I think we sorely need on both lines. So it was great to see Jenkins bring that passion and that fire, especially after just getting paid.
You know, I'm sure that's a big deal, right? Like,
sure,
you get payday. I mean, they're out there throwing their bodies and going to screw their bodies up for the rest of their life, and you work your ass off and you get the payday. It's a big deal. So it was kind of a good deal.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I mean, I'm always in favor of the players getting paid and getting paid handsomely. I'd rather that they get the money than the NFL and the owners do. So, good for them. So, I think to summarize this topic, I think we're both in agreement that the Packers are proving, but probably a little too late and not enough to make a deep run into the playoffs.
I would agree.
Yeah. So, I want to go to my favorite topic, sharpening the knife.
They will call sharpening the knife, especially on the gland penis. Rub them 50 times.
Isles, what do you think the Packers need to do this week to come out of Lambeau Field with a victory against the hated Minnesota Vikings?
I think that the key thing to sharpen is to make sure to do whatever it takes to at least not let Jefferson beat you. You know, there's those teams that have that player, and you have to definitely not let him beat you, because looking at the first game, he absolutely destroyed us, and you just can't let that happen. I think another key thing that we need to sharpen is really putting as much pressure as possible on Cousins, because I do believe that he is one of those QBs that's susceptible to mistakes when he's getting hit, when he's feeling the pressure, and he can give us a free 1 or 2 turnovers potentially that could be the difference in this game. And so those are the 2 major things. And then again, I think that there can't be what there was maybe in that Miami game on defense overall. They just need to come out of the gate the way they played the second half and play as hard as you possibly can, because this is a team that has a lot of weapons, can put up a lot of points fast. And we just can't get too far behind, because I don't think that our offense is good enough yet to come back from a pretty sizable deficit.
I would agree. Yeah, you got to contain Jefferson and basically contain the passing attack. I mean, let him run a little bit. Not necessarily let him run, but contain the run game. But more importantly, I want them to attack the passing game, and I want them to get at Cousins and, get these turnovers like you talked about. On the offensive side of the ball, I want to see the Packers get up. I want them to take the early lead, and I want them to keep pushing. I want them to run the ball effectively, and I want Rodgers to take his dropbacks and hit the receivers at the top of their routes. What I mean by that is I want Rodgers to play in rhythm. I don't want to see him patting the ball, wandering around, scrambling around, trying to find a receiver that he likes. So often this year we've seen that these plays and the design of the plays has gotten receivers open, but he seems to pass that up for a bigger play, or he's looking for something else. So I want him to play within the system. I want them to get up early, because this defense plays better when the Packers have a lead.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it's built.
I think that's a great point. It's a great thing to point out about Rodgers, because I do think that even over his entire career, that has always been a problem. A is he tends to want to go deep too much, and 2 is he just hangs onto the frickin' ball back there too much, and it can lead to huge sacks. Like, he takes a lot of sacks that take us out of frickin' field goal position, and you're just like, you held on to the ball for 10 seconds. Why don't you throw the frickin' thing away?
Yeah. Needless sacks. That drives me nuts too.
Yeah. It kind of scares me with Zeke coming back if he smells that turf. Right?
I don't know. I mean, yeah. Z's going to be barking. It should provide some entertainment, but I hope we bust him in the larynx.
I know.
I hope we bust him in the mouth.
I do too. Let's just take a moment to just talk about the Badgers last night. Did you watch a little bit of Fickle?
I watched the game. It wasn't a great game by any means, but they got the victory, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
And I think getting this team out, getting the Fickle era off on the right foot is a great thing. And if we want to tie this into the Packers, well, this was Jim Leonard's last official game as a Badger. So now he's a free agent. Does he come to the Packers?
Yeah.
Maybe. Who knows? He's going to have no shortage of suitors. So we'll just have to wait and see. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I would agree with the kind of the right way to kick it off. I think it's a class move on Fickle to just be there, be supportive, but let Leonard kind of play that out, because he's a true Badger.
Yes.
It will be interesting to see where he ends up going. And like you said, I got to think after this year that there's a possibility that, there could be some interest in Green Bay for him, which would be classic. Would you invite his style to Green Bay?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all screaming for anyone but Joe Barry. And I do like the way Jim Leonard's defense plays, the way it's played at Wisconsin. But really, only time will tell if it'll be effective in the NFL. I have a feeling he can coach anywhere. He's just one of those dudes. But the reality is, we're not going to know until something happens.
Yep. I would agree. But we got the W.
We got the W. Yeah, and let's get a W this week, Isles.
Yep, I would agree.
Hate those fucking Vikings.
Yeah.
God, I hate them.
I just want the Viking fans to be scared of us because like I was saying, even though we're not at our best, in their minds, they always think of us as the best because we've been kicking their ass for 20 years.
That's right.
And when Big Brother has a chance to make it in the playoffs, it makes them very uncomfortable. And I love that.
That's right. So you got to bust them in their chops.
Yep.
That's for sure. Well, I want to let everyone know that in the next day or two, we're going to do a special segment of Breaking Down the Game where I'm going to be talking to my wife. Most people know that both Isles and I live in Minnesota, and we both are married to nice young ladies who grew up in Minnesota. So it's going to be interesting to get their perspective, my wife's perspective, on what it's like to live with a crazy Packer fan. And I'm sure she has a few funny stories to share with anyone. So please look out for that in the next day or two. And as always, thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for the subscribers, to the Pack Attack, everyone who fucks with your boy TR. Thanks for watching. Isles, any last things you want to say, bud?
No, I'm good. Just as usual, go Pack. We got to get the W.
Go Pack. Let's get the W.
All right.